Welcome to the Roadmap to Secure Love. In today's episode, Kim and Kyle discuss how our first response in conflict is shaped by our past, and how making space for a second response can transform relationships. Let's dive in.
So my sweet husband, who I've got to say this year will be 25 years, Kyle, 25
Wow.
years. I know. When we first got married, you think it's all bliss. It was hard, right? But he read this book, and I can't even remember what book it was anymore. But he came to me and he was like, I read this book. It was so awesome. And it talked about the first response and second response. And at the time, I wasn't a therapist. So I was like, okay, whatever. And he says, the first response is my family of origin.
Mhm.
The second response is the man I'm trying to be. So for like the first year of our marriage, whenever we fought, he would say, that was my first response. That was my first response. Um, Make space for my second response, the man I want to be. And it's kind of stuck with me,
Mhm.
right? And I've noticed, even though we don't say that anymore, where I go, Daniel, that was my first response. Make space for my second response. And he doesn't say it to me anymore. It still shapes us
Mhm.
25 years later.
Right.
So today I kind of want to talk about how does that play out? For our first response is our family of origin. Do you see my little boo-boo? Look at my
Mhm.
boo-boo. I see that as I'm in the film. Hey, everybody, I cut my finger today. Woo. Is to say, what is our first response and then what's our second response?
Yeah, I mean, this is a lot of us have this reactive parts of ourselves, right? The stuff that we learned growing up or that we learned kind of our attachment moves, right, that show up. And often our partners hear that first response and then they're reacting to that. And there's not much space for us to do things differently. And so then that leads to our cycles, that leads to our conflicts. It's like when I'm doing the dishes after I cleaned and cooked for the family, I'm cleaning and doing the dishes, and my wife is working, we just put the kids down. I can feel the anger start to come up. And I want to get critical, like, you didn't do this today, you didn't do that today, I've done all this. And we start to get kind of in that tit for tat cycle. And underneath that, well, actually, if I do that, all my wife is going to hear is, you're not enough. You're failing me. You're a horrible partner. You don't contribute. And that's not true. So she's going to want to defend and want to push back. No, I did this today. I watched our son while I was working. Can't you understand how hard that is? And we get into a whole cycle and miss each other. But really, what's underneath that first response for me is, if I slow that down, is I'm really needing help and I'm feeling overwhelmed. And if I can go, oh, that was my first response. That's not actually what I'm wanting you to hear. Let me try that again. What I'm really saying is, I'm really overwhelmed in this moment. Can you do this? Can you take over tidying up the living room, you know, as soon as you're done working, so I know that that's going to get done? That really helps me feel like we're partnered in taking care of our home. That sends a very clear message. That's about what's going on for me, what I need, and what it means to me if it happens. And that often it gets a response of, yeah, I can totally do that. And so that's a good example of, like, in those moments, my first response is, I want to get angry. I want to point out all the things I'm doing right, all the things you're doing wrong. And it's going to lead into a whole cycle where neither of us get seen and we end up in a fight.
Yeah, not helpful.
Not helpful, not productive.
No,
No,
but it's real.
it's real. Oh, yeah. That anger is very real. That criticism really wants to come out and lash out,
Hmm.
but it doesn't get us where we want to go, nor does
No,
it make us closer or more connected.
no, and it doesn't help us become the people that we really want to be. So, um, I am learning for like the last billion years to speak up.
Yeah.
Good gosh, this is hard. Yeah.
Hmm.
And so my first response comes from my family of origin when people ask me to do stuff. I'm like, oh yes, of course.
Hmm.
Would love to do that for you because that equals being accepted, being liked, being shown as competent, being worthy. And it ends up me just being burnt out
Hmm.
and doing something for somebody else that I actually don't want to do. So what I've been doing, it's been such a joy. And I mean that very sarcastically because it's been hard, right? It's like my first response is yes. And so now I'm learning is the person that I want to be is the person who loves myself and can tell people no. So I tell people yes, because that's my family of origin, my first response. And then I go back and I have the joy of telling them, actually, I said yes, but I actually don't want to do it. So I'm going to have to, take that back. And the answer is going to be no.
Hmm.
And doing that is feels a little awkward, you know,
Yeah. Yep.
it's like, hello. Um, but it's also teaching me that it's okay for me to be this person, my second response. It's okay for me to say no and still have worth.
Hmm.
It's okay for me to say no or to say yes and change my mind.
Hmm.
It's okay. I still have value.
Right.
So that's kind of like how it's been playing out fun for me, Kyle.
Which, I mean, and this is so powerful is you're automatically there is that first response, which is automatic, which is yes, I can totally help you. I'll be there because, of course, you want to be someone of value. You want to be helpful. You want to be supportive, but you don't have the bandwidth for that. You don't have the capacity for that. And so, even though it's really awkward to come back and say no, that is you prioritizing yourself and your own care and what you actually have bandwidth to do, which then makes you feel like, oh, there's room for me here. I don't have to be small.
No. And this is all so human. I mean, whether it's dishes,
Right.
saying yes or no,
Hmm.
whether it's, I don't know what Daniel and I used to fight about when we first got married, but I'm sure it was all kinds of stuff that all of you can relate.
Hmm.
We all come from our family of origin, and not all of some of it's really great that we want to keep,
Right.
and some of it just is not healthy
Or helpful.
or
Right.
helpful.
Yeah. And that's what's hard is I think what I see a lot in our couples is they have these first response and they don't even as the individual partners don't feel like there's room for their growth. Oh, well, I just did that and it had that reaction, so now my partner is really the problem, or this is always going to be this way. And it doesn't leave room for really what I just said. I didn't even like. I didn't like how I talked to you. I don't want to talk to you that way.
Right.
How I want to talk to you is this way. I want to be able to communicate with you with love and care and directness and assertiveness in a tender way so that we can find a win-win. We can do this as partners. And this is new for me. I'm still working on that. It's still something for me to grow into. But I think there's so many people that we get stuck in this first response that and partners like, well, you said this. How could I even trust this second thing that you said? And it's like, okay, yes, I totally understand that it's gonna be hard to trust. That first response is what I learned. It's how I've coped with the stress. And I know it makes you feel like are inadequate. That's not actually how I see you.
Wow.
Can you make room for actually what my heart wants you to hear, which is, I am really struggling and I need you. I need your help. I need your support. I need to have a sense today, tonight, that we are in this life together. And this is what that could look like for me.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is work on both sides, the speaker and the listener.
Hmm.
Okay. So the person who's speaking, who's stuck in the first response, has to be aware.
Yeah.
That's their work of saying, ugh, ouch,
Hmm.
that wasn't very cool. Let me change that.
Hmm.
But the listener, the person who's receiving that message, has the work of saying, I'm going to make space
Right.
for the person you want to be.
Hmm. Which is hard as a listener because it's like, you just zinged me.
Using me.
I don't want to be nice back to you. I don't want to like then the apology on on the speaker part is really helpful and the acknowledgement of that is helpful. But this is the hard part for that listener is okay, they are apologizing. Can I receive that apology And can I make space for them to try it again? Can I open my heart up to that this is the more vulnerable part, or this is who they want to be in our relationship, in our marriage, so that we can grow together? Because that's actually what it's about. The speaker has to grow and the listener also has to grow with them. And that's hard. It's hard to not go, no, you were a jerk to me. So screw you. I don't want your message. Screw this second response. Armored up. I'm not going to talk to you. And
Yeah.
then the speaker's going to be, well, here we go again. And we're back into the cycle. So it does take both partners to grow and do that differently.
Yeah. But if the listener can make space for the second response, the person we want to be,
Hmm.
we will show up differently each time because it feels good to call out our mistakes.
And that there's space for our growth. Yeah.
I want to be a part of my partner's growth,
Hmm.
and I want him to be a part of my growth.
Right.
I want to be a better human.
Hmm.
I need him to create space for me to do that,
Right. Even when I make a mistake.
even when I make a mistake,
Hmm.
even when I sound like the not helpful parts of my family of origin.
Yeah. And that's what's so hard. But I think going back to what you're saying, if you as the listening partner can make space for the speaking partner's growth and you can take that in and they see that you take that in and make space for their heart and who they want to be, that over time will lead to them showing up more as the person they want to be.
Yeah,
If you block it and you say, no, you said this, I can't trust what you said, it's going to only tell them that there's no space for your growth. And it's going
right.
to probably lead them to continue, even if they don't like it, that first response, because that's what they learned. And that feels like the best protective move. It's a lot easier for me, if I use my example, to get angry and pissed off and think in my head how my partner doesn't do all this stuff and I'm all alone and all the narrative that then validates why I should say what I say. But it never brings my partner closer. It never brings us into being a team. And I know when I'm regulated, when I'm not activated, but when I'm regulated, we are a team. And I can see all the ways that's happening. But when I'm dysregulated and I'm angry and I'm feeling overwhelmed and I'm feeling alone, the narrative, how I see the world totally changes and it wants to lash out.
Of course.
But that does not help the relationship.
No, but it is human.
It's so human.
It's so human. And growth in a relationship can either separate us or connect us.
Say
So
more about that.
change is inevitable in a relationship. I'm the person I was 25 years ago is not the person I am today with my husband, right? And my husband made a decision to be part of my growth of where I am today.
Right.
And I made a decision to be a part of his growth. And when you do that, you become this beautiful team and your relationship evolves
Hmm.
very beautifully and it grows with every stage of life,
Hmm.
right? And it has the potential to get stronger and more fulfilling.
Hmm.
But if we don't make time for that, and if we don't make time for the change, the inevitable of the change, then the relationship can kind of get stuck
Yeah.
and growth stops. And then, but we're still changing, but our relationship is at a standstill, but I'm still changing.
Hmm.
So what happens is that the relationship actually starts to fall apart
Right.
and distant and not helpful.
Hmm.
And then you see major conflicts, separation, divorce, right?
Yeah.
Because we haven't been a part of each other's change.
Well, when we can't turn to each other to share our growth, to make room for our mistakes and learn, we turn away to other things.
Mhm.
And that's where we get that emotional withdrawal. That's where we start turning to other things for comfort or reassurance. And it does, it leaves the relationship stagnant. Or as Dr. John Gottman would call it, leads the relationship to the roach motel, right? Where there's roaches everywhere. It's not a place you actually want to stay, but your relationship gets stuck there if we don't make space for our growth and learning and growing as a couple as well as individuals.
Okay, that imagery is so gross.
It's nasty.
Like, I don't want to stay in a roach hotel, you know.
Right. But I think that's what it's such a good image of how sometimes we can feel in a relationship. That we can feel like I don't want to be here. And that's so devastating for so many people because we have our lives intertwined. There's kids, there's finances, there's careers. We've been through decades of life together. And no one wants to end up there. And so these moments of the first response, second response, making space for that second response, being explicit, talking about that helps us stay out of that roach motel. Because if we just stay stuck in our first response, we will end up in that roach motel because we're going to both have the first response to each other and we're going to grow distant and not want to be with each other because we're just hurting each other reactively.
Yep, I love it. And so we often say, like, don't ask for perfection, make space for each other's try, right?
Mhm.
We need to make space for each other's try. And this, we're saying, make space for your partner's growth,
Right.
for them to get it wrong and then pivot
Mhm.
and choose a different path.
Yeah. I mean, this is what we do in our couples therapy. We point out, oh, when you get angry, your partner gets defensive. What's actually underneath that anger? Well, actually, I'm feeling really alone and I'm really scared that my partner doesn't want to be there for me. Oh, wow. Can you let them into that part that's scared right now? Oh, and then they share it and their partner's, oh, you're scared? Of
I
course I
never
want to be
knew
there.
it.
Right. Of course I want to be there for you. I love you. And the person's like, ah, what a relief. But this is what Kim and I are talking about is we literally actively do this in our couples therapy sessions. And this is the space for growth. This is the space for healing. This is the space for connection, is when we're able to see how our first responses pull us farther apart and make space for us doing it differently. Because if that partner were like, no, I'm not going to listen to that, you're scared, you were angry first, well, we're going to get stuck there again. But if they go, oh, you're scared, I want to comfort you now. Now we have growth and connection, which is what all of us humans really want and need.
Yeah. And I just love this image that you're talking about of therapy, because we do that in therapy,
Mhm,
where people are constantly coming with their first response.
mhm,
And Kyle, you and I are helping what we call organize
mhm.
those feelings and those thoughts to help them give a second response that actually brings people closer,
Right.
right? And so the person who's speaking learns how to do this second response that actually brings connection. And the listener is invited to create space for that second, more healthier, more loving interaction.
Yep.
Good stuff.
Mhm. I mean, that's what we do in our therapy, and that's what we're pinpointing right now. This is how it can look to grow and build a secure relationship, to really love each other fully.
Yeah. So the goal is just to notice when you respond, whose voice is that? Is that yours? Is it your mom's? Is it your grandma's? Is it your pain? Whose is it?
Hmm.
Your pastor, your religious leader, your imam? Who is it? And then wonder if that's the response you want. And if it's not, how do you want to show up? How would you change it?
Hmm. And that's where that introspection, that slowing down, connecting with ourselves, looking at our behaviors and looking at who we want to be allows us to show up differently, which gives us our partner a chance to make space for us showing up differently, which is where relationships grow and change.
They grow and change in that second response.
Hmm.
Today we explored 1. How first responses in conflict are shaped by our past. 2. The power of pausing before reacting. 3. Why making space for growth strengthens relationships. And 4. How intentional communication fosters connection. When both partners embrace the second response, relationships evolve with trust and understanding. Follow the roadmap to secure love on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. Sign up for the Secure Attachment Path course to learn practical tools for building secure connections. Link in the show notes. Until next time, stay connected and keep listening with love.